This is something that I've been predicting for quite some time now. It was inevitable. I always thought it would be an external dollar crisis that would set these events in motion. I didn't realize that we would do it to ourselves, but we have. We've pricked our own bubble, and there's a lot of air that's going to come out of it. Donald Trump looked at our huge trade deficits and just concluded that the trade deficits themselves were the problem, and that they must be the result of foreigners cheating us and ripping us off. Well, the reality is the trade deficits are the symptom of the problem. The problem is here in America, and we're not getting ripped off by anybody. Nobody's cheating. The problem is we as Americans, for decades now, have lived beyond our means. We consume more than we produce. Now, how is that possible? Well, we go into debt. We sell off our assets. We outsource our manufacturing, and we borrow money. And, we get to live a standard of living that's higher than what we're really entitled to based on our collective productivity. Now, it's the rest of the world that makes that possible. They produce what we don't. They buy our assets and they loan us the money. And so what does that mean in America? Well, we have more stuff to buy at lower prices. We get lower interest rates because of all this foreign capital, and our stock prices are higher. So we get to be rich on paper because we have a high stock market, and we get low interest rates and low consumer prices. Now, according to Donald Trump, that's the world screwing us over, ripping us off. And he wants that to stop. Well, if that stops, well, now the ride on the global gravy train is over. We can't live beyond our means anymore. So we have to live within our means, which means we have to consume a lot less. We have to save a lot more. It means that our interest rates go way up because we're no longer borrowing all this money from foreigners. Our consumer prices go way up because we're no longer getting all their stuff. Our stock prices go down because they're not buying our stocks. So Americans are going to see a huge decline in our standard of living and a big drop in their net worth. But that's liberation. I was warning that Trump was threatening to liberate us from our standard of living and liberating us from our stock market wealth. That's what's happened. And it's just starting. This is going to play out for the rest of the year, next year. This is a huge trend that's just going to get more and more momentum. Gold's up over $250 in the last 3 days. We're accelerating. Last couple of days, we were $100 a day. And maybe we'll be up again. Maybe we'll be up another 100 by the time they close today's trading. But what's happening, and what I've been telling people was happening all last year, as the price of gold went from 2,000 to 3,000 and nobody cared and nobody was buying it because everybody was, sidetracked by Bitcoin and all the talk about digital gold. Nobody but foreign central banks were buying actual gold. And the reason they're buying gold is because they're getting rid of their dollars. They are preparing for a world where the dollar is no longer the center of the monetary system, where it's no longer the reserve currency. And so if you're going to get rid of dollars, what do you replace it with? Well, gold is the most likely alternative to the dollar. And that's what they've been doing. Although I think recently central banks are probably also adding euros. My guess is that the Bank of China is buying euros as it may be selling dollars, because I think they need to replace Americans as customers. And the Europeans, there's more Europeans than there are Americans. And now that the euro is at a 3-year high and soaring, the Europeans are getting richer as Americans are getting poorer. And so all those goods that China can no longer export to America, they can export those goods to Europe. And as a matter of fact, China is not going to be importing any more goods from America. And so they're going to import a lot of the agricultural products or other raw materials that they used to get from us. They're going to import them from South America. And so now those countries are going to be richer because they're going to have more export earnings. And now they're going to be able to afford the goods that China is no longer shipping to America. See, Trump really overplayed his hand. He thought he had the cards. He had nothing. Because it's easy to replace consumption because anybody can consume. We don't do anything hard by shopping. The hard part is production. Supply is what creates demand. It's easy for China to consume what they produce or to trade what they produce with others. What's impossible is for America to consume what we don't produce. Trade ends, America is stuck. All we have is paper. And that's why inflation is going to go through the roof in America, because we're going to have all this money with nothing to buy. And eventually Americans are going to start buying gold. They've been selling gold. They've been selling gold stocks. But, I've been telling people to buy gold, for over 20 years. When I first started recommending physical gold to my clients, it was under $300 an ounce. It's gone up more than tenfold. In fact, gold has outperformed the stock market for the last 25 years dramatically. I think the S&P is down maybe 65% priced in gold. So the whole bull market is an illusion created by inflation. Gold lets you see economic reality. But really, for the first time in my career, I'm actually telling people that for now, don't buy physical gold. Just wait, because even though the gold stocks are at new 52-week highs and they're up maybe, 15, 20%, they're jumping finally. But gold stocks are much lower than they were a few years ago.
Think about what happened during COVID, and there were all these signals sent by powerful people that something greater than COVID would soon be upon us, whatever that is. So whether it's a giant war, another world war of that sorts, or, something else, COVID 2.0, what we saw during COVID, insane issues with inflation that persist and insane supply chain issues. It's probably a good idea to have a supply of stuff you need to survive in your house. For X number of days, weeks, months, whatever. That's different for every person, but it's definitely not. It's definitely not a bad idea. And I don't think it's a tinfoil hat thing to say I'd like to be able to feed my family if they close all the grocery store. We sort of saw with COVID, how insane it was. I live in Chile in South America. And when COVID started, there was some insane stuff there where you had to show papers to get into grocery stores and stuff for a time. That could come back. It's not as crazy now as it might have been 4 or 5 years ago to talk about that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with being prepared. There's probably something more wrong with being not prepared at all. But, a lot of times government incompetence is the excuse. So, just talking about financial policy and stuff, I think it's easier to pick apart in those cases because you can see the obvious who benefits and who doesn't sometimes more easily. And they'll sort of be when the Fed printed a bunch of money during COVID and gave it to BlackRock to manage, was that incompetence? Especially when BlackRock wrote a plan at the end of 2019 of the monetary policy that the Fed followed exactly when COVID happened about what the Fed would need to do during an unforeseen crisis. It's just was that incompetence or is that corruption? A lot of times they try and absolve themselves of when they sort of get caught or start to get caught for something corrupt, they'll be oh, don't look any further. We're just really stupid, But if you consider just the massive amount of wealth transfer that's happened in the past 20 years to the people at the very top, well, I think it's obvious. But that can't all have been because of incompetence. And more has come out with COVID too, the safe and effective stuff about the vaccines. A lot of people in alternative media knew it was experimental and that there wasn't enough testing and stuff, and they were censored, and then the stuff was forced on people through mandates and things like that. Was that incompetence? They knew then what a lot of people in alternative media knew then, they being, the people in charge, and they still put it through anyway, and now they're acting like it didn't happen. Yeah, because they're trying to put AI in charge of the internet, and not just in charge of censoring what's on the internet, but also having AI make the lion's share of online content. So supposedly by 2025, generative AI like ChatGPT is going to produce 96 or something % of everything you read online, which means mainstream media journalists are going to be completely replaced by them. I think there have been some magazines that have been caught using ChatGPT to write their stories already. I think Sports Illustrated was one. Only going to get crazier. And so when you have AI both producing and then curating, i.e. censoring everything, then AI dominates the information environment, and whoever programs AI and stipulates what information is okay and who isn't has unprecedented control. And when you consider that most people today get their information from online or, digital sources, that's unprecedented control of what people, not just how the information that people read and receive, but also, you're manipulating people, how people perceive reality. And that obviously translates into how people behave. And actually, Henry Kissinger and the guy that he named as his heir, which is Eric Schmidt, the former Google CEO, wrote a book on AI explicitly about that. And how AI is basically going to control how we perceive reality by taking control of online content in its entirety. And that us becoming increasingly dependent on AI for everything is going to cognitively diminish people so that we won't be able to perceive reality or make sense of anything without AI doing it for us.
It's going to be have you seen the film WALL-E?
Yeah, maybe years and years and years ago.
in the pods drinking milkshakes.
Yeah, but worse than that, because it seems like they're sort of, they have some sort of cognitive faculty left. What Kissinger and Schmidt say is that people are going to lose that. And it's the plan that they lose that.
Maybe they just won't need us anymore.
Well, I think, if people can't control how they perceive reality, they're no longer capable of critical analysis and thought. It's very easy to decide what you do with people.
So where does that put you then in terms of AI? Are you pro the technology?
I have a lot of
opinions.
opinions. I think the whole idea of getting a lot of people to use ChatGPT and all of this stuff is to lead us down this path that Kissinger and Schmidt, among others, sort of are charting out for humanity. It's pretty much common sense, though. If you develop a skill and then don't do it for 10 or 15 years, for example, you kind of forget how to do it, right? Or even, I graduated from university a little more than 10 years ago. How well do I recall the stuff that I took in university? Not great, right? So there's this whole idea of if you don't use it, you lose it. So if people are depending on AI to tell them where to turn when they're driving their car and, no one uses actual maps anymore. I understand that it's convenient, right? And I'm not saying we need to go back to the 90s, but it becomes after a while a slippery slope where people are just having the computer tell them everything to do, every step of their lives ends up becoming micromanaged to an extent. And the idea is that AI, through all the data that it absorbs about us, knows so much about us. Some of these people say it knows us better than we even know ourselves. That allows for an unprecedented degree of manipulation. And the problem is that the people producing and programming AI and ultimately controlling AI and what it can do not have our best interests at heart. And it is not a good idea to basically hand them our brains in a bag.